Have you ever worked hard for weeks, for months, and still felt like nothing was changing? Have you ever watched someone else succeed and wondered if they were given a map that you never received? Sometimes life feels like walking through a dark room. Your hands stretch forward, searching for a door, but all you feel is empty air. You take another step, then another. Still nothing. Meanwhile, other people seem to walk forward as if the lights were already on for them. But what if that feeling of being stuck is not failure? What if it is actually the moment right before something powerful begins? Today's story is about a young man named Elias and a lesson hidden inside the sound of a hammer striking iron. Once you understand this story, every frustration in your life will start to look different. Long ago, in a quiet valley between two towering mountains, lived a young man named Elias. Elias was not lazy. In fact, he had more ideas than anyone in the village. He dreamed about building ships. He dreamed about trading across lands. He dreamed about creating a life people would remember. But Elias had a terrible habit. He never stayed long enough to finish what he started. He planted crops but abandoned the fields. He began carving a boat, but stopped halfway. He wrote plans for businesses and journeys, but closed the notebook before anything could happen. People in the village said Elias had talent, but talent alone never built anything. Inside, Elias felt like a man surrounded by unfinished dreams. One evening after another, failed attempt to start a small trade business, Elias walked alone to the edge of the valley. And there he found an old forge. The forge glowed in the darkness like a small sun. Inside stood an elderly blacksmith named Master Corin. His hands were scarred. His shoulders were strong, but his face carried a calm silence. Elias sat quietly on a wooden stool and watched. Master Corin pulled a glowing piece of iron from the fire. He placed it on the anvil. Then he raised a heavy hammer. Clang. The hammer struck the metal with incredible force. The sound echoed across the valley, but the iron did not move. Corin struck again. Sieleng. Still nothing. Elias kept watching. 10 strikes, 20 strikes, 40 strikes, 50 strikes. To Elias, the metal looked exactly the same. Finally he spoke. "Why do you keep hitting it? It isn't changing." The old blacksmith did not stop. Without even looking up, he said quietly, "The metal is listening." The hammer continued to fall. By the 80th strike, Elias grew restless. He began thinking about his own life, the unfinished boat, the abandoned gardens, the ideas he had left behind. To him, the blacksmith looked foolish. At the 95th strike, Elias stood up. "I've seen enough," he said. "Some things are simply too hard to change." The hammer continued. Strike 99. Nothing. Strike 100. Still nothing. Elias shook his head and walked toward the door. Then suddenly the 101st strike landed. The sound was completely different. Clear, sharp, almost like a bell. The iron softened instantly. Under a few gentle taps, it began transforming into a shining blade. The change happened so quickly it felt like magic. Elias froze in the doorway. Master Corin lowered his hammer and looked at him. Then he spoke. "The world believes the blade was created by the final strike, but the truth is, every strike before it was weakening the resistance inside the metal." Elias walked slowly back to the anvil. He stared at the blade, and suddenly he understood something that shook him to the core. His life was not a series of failures. It was a collection of unfinished strikes. Master Corin spoke again. "Most people stop at strike 70. Some stop at 90. A few reach 99. Then they walk away right before the metal begins to change." Elias said nothing. He turned and ran. But this time he wasn't running away. He was running back to his life. Elias returned home. The half-finished boat was still by the river. The rocky field still waited to be cleared. But this time, Elias worked differently. When his body grew tired, he whispered, "Strike 40. When doubt appeared weeks later, he said quietly, "Strike 70. He stopped measuring success by what he could see. Instead, he measured it by one rule: never stop swinging the hammer. Months passed. Then, years. The boat was finished. The field became fertile. Trade began to grow. Eventually, Elias became one of the most respected builders in the entire valley. When people asked for the secret of his success, Elias did something strange. He did not talk about intelligence. He did not talk about talent. Instead, he brought them into his study and pointed to an old hammer hanging on the wall. Then he said quietly, "I'm not smarter than anyone else. I'm simply the man who stayed for the 101st strike." We live in a world that celebrates breakthroughs. But breakthroughs are built on invisible effort. The athlete lifting a trophy, the entrepreneur building a company, the artist creating a masterpiece. What we see is the final strike. What we don't see are the hundreds that came before it. So if you feel like nothing is changing in your life right now, remember this: the metal rarely bends on the first strike, and success is often just one more swing of the hammer. If this story spoke to you, write the word "strike" in the comments. A simple promise that today you will not quit. You will swing the hammer one more time,